king of German mercenaries.
Chapter 132 Various Routines. Lolita in ancient times matured precociously. Although Angela della Rovere was only 15 years old, she was already a standard lady and was well versed in all kinds of etiquette. She was much better than Marin, the wild aristocrat. But no matter what, Angela was just a 15-year-old girl, which in later times would be equivalent to a junior high school girl. Although Marin was not good at coaxing girls in his previous life, it does not mean that he does not know how to coax them. There are a lot of so-called routines for picking up girls on the internet. However, girls in later generations have more experience, so even if you know the tricks, you may not succeed. Moreover, many tricks have been used too much. But what era is it now? It's the end of the Middle Ages. In this era, entertainment culture is extremely scarce, which gives Marin many opportunities to show his talents. For example, just telling a joke can make Angela, who was trying to be a lady, laugh so hard that her stomach hurts. Marin was actually very puzzled. The jokes he told were not very funny. Unexpectedly, Angela had such a low sense of humor. Then, he came up with some brain teasers, which confused the little girl. There are 7 birds on a tree. I shoot one down with my rifle. How many are left? 6. Such a simple math problem. Wrong. There is not a single one left. I have already shot one bird dead, but the others are still sitting on the tree waiting for me to shoot them again. Are you stupid? Are you stupid? Ah. It seems. It's true. Then, the little girl was very happy again. Such stupid brain teasers made Angela very confused. Although she couldn't answer any of the brain teasers, she was very interested in them. However, Marin is a lord after all, and he can't always play with Angela. So, after thinking it over, Marin decided to find a few smart girls among the people to play with Angela. Otherwise, if he always accompanies this little ancestor, will he still have to work? But the biggest problem is that the little girl doesn't know Frisian and doesn't speak German well. In the short term, she has to do it herself. For this reason, Marin not only makes the little girl happy every day, but also teaches her to speak German. When the little girl can speak German fluently, the little girls who are her playmates can play with her. In order to deal with Angela's curiosity, Marlin entertained her in various ways every day. In addition to telling jokes and playing brain teasers, Marlin also told the little girl Andersen's fairy tales and Grimm's fairy tales by her bed before going to bed every night. Although she was already 15 years old, the little girl had no resistance to fairy tales and was deeply attracted. Originally, the little girl was quite resistant and shy about Marlin, the little rascal, staying in her room late at night. However, after listening to the fairy tale, Angela couldn't stop and acquiesce to Marlin staying in her room at night. Even after listening to the story, Marlin secretly kissed her while she was distracted, and she finally acquiesced. To be honest, Marin couldn't bring himself to do it to such a young girl. After all, Angela was still a minor. However, Marin knew that if he married her, the benefits in the future would be too great. So, Marin had to bite the bullet and do it. In order to win the heart of the little girl, Marin, who is 30 years old in his heart, has to learn from those weird uncles and coax Angela, the cute little girl. The little girl was not stupid, but she was a little silly. Every time she was told a fairy tale, she would often be in a trance and immersed in the fantasy world. Then, Marin, the old horsefly, took the opportunity to kiss her secretly. At first, the little girl was very angry and thought Marin was too vulgar. However, after kissing him more, the little girl didn't care anymore. Moreover, she was also very clear about her situation. Pope Alexander VI wanted to kill all the members of the Rovere family, and it was very good that Marin, the lord, was willing to take her in. Moreover, the Wadden Islands were far away from Italy, a den of trouble, and could better protect Angela from harm. However, Angela was afraid that Marin just wanted to play around and was unwilling to marry her. You know, in the Catholic world, there is a big difference between a wife and a lover. Children born by lovers have no inheritance rights and are looked down upon. Although Marlin is not tall and strong, he is also very handsome. Girls of Angela's age like handsome boys like Marlin the most. Therefore, Angela does not reject Marlin's pursuit at all. The only worry is that Marlin is unwilling to marry her and is just playing with her. After learning about Angela's worries indirectly, Marin laughed. He rubbed the girl's hair, took out a bright rose from his back like a magic trick, and then suddenly put on a loving expression. Angela, I swear in the name of God, I am willing to marry you. Really? The big loli was a little happy, but nervous inside. Of course, you see I have sworn in the name of God, how dare I disrespect the gods? In fact, Marin is an atheist, and he dares to swear casually. However, in this era, no one in Western Europe dares to joke about God. Besides, Marin is not deceiving the little girl. Knowing that you are a close relative of the next pope, there are great benefits to marrying you, so why should I break my oath? The little girl took the bright red rose handed to her by Marin and sniffed it happily. However, there were thorns on the stems of roses. Hey, be careful. Seeing that Angela was pricked by the rose thorn, Marin quickly grabbed Angela's white and tender hand, pulled out the thorn, then sucked the wound with his mouth, and comforted the little girl from time to time. Then, in order to divert the little girl's attention, another fairy tale plot unfolded, and Angela was deeply attracted and diverted again. While the little girl was in a daze, Marin took the opportunity to sneak a kiss on Angela's face. However, Marin's kiss on Angela was not a lewd act of a blaming uncle, but a kiss of love for a cute thing. Even though he was planning to marry this girl, Marin didn't plan to do it now. Because Angela was too young. Even if Marin wanted to do it, he had to wait until the little girl was 18 years old. Angela, 15 years old, hadn't grown up yet and looked very immature. There were 2 small lumps on her chest, which were completely invisible when she put on clothes. For this reason, Marin specifically asked the little girl to drink more milk and eat whatever she wanted to supplement her. To make her more mature so that it would be easier to take action. Unfortunately, there is no papaya in Europe at the moment. Otherwise, let the little girl drink papaya milk every day to replenish her milk. The food at Marin Castle is the best in Europe right now. There are all kinds of Chinese food dishes that are dazzling. Little girls are usually greedy. Faced with a wide range of Chinese food, Angela happily ate and drank, but was worried about getting fat. But Marin told her that she only needed to eat less at night. So, every lunch was very rich. And in the evening, dinner was mainly vegetables. Jokes. Brain teasers. Fairy tales. Sending roses. Delicious food. All kinds of low-end tricks made Angela, a little girl from the Middle Ages, fall for them. These tricks may be very low-end and common in modern times, and can only be used to coax little girls. But hundreds of years ago, they were very high-end. Therefore, Marin's various low-end tricks are very effective. Chapter 133, Frisia Changes Hands, Part 1. While Marin was coaxing the little girl in his castle, in Dresden, the capital of the Duchy of Saxony, Albrecht, Duke of Saxony, gathered an army of 10,000 and was ready to attack the Frisian noble republic. In order to gather 10,000 troops in a short period of time, Duke Albrecht went to Wittenberg, where his nephew Frederick III, Elector of Saxony, was, and borrowed 5,000 troops from the Electorate of Saxony. This Frederick III was the prince who later supported Martin Luther in his religious reform. The Saxon family was very powerful. In the late Middle Ages, when the economy was very backward, especially in the underdeveloped German region, the powerful princes usually only had a standing army of a few thousand. It was very difficult to gather tens of thousands of troops. Because it costs 200,000 gold coins every year to feed tens of thousands of troops. This is just the daily expenses. Once the war started, the loss of ammunition, weapons and armor, and the consumption of food brought by the march would be even more expensive. But in this era, even among the big vassal states, there were not many with an annual fiscal revenue of 200,000 gold coins. Because, in this era when agriculture was extremely underdeveloped, it was difficult to have 200,000 gold coins per year just by land tax. Only the Hanseatic League, which was engaged in business, could have a large amount of money income. The Saxony Business District is the second largest business district in the Hanseatic League, and it has a close relationship with the Wettin family of the Saxony dynasty, and many merchants are actually affiliated with the Wettin family. Therefore, the Wettin family is very financially strong. Generally speaking, in peacetime, ordinary duchies and counties only kept 2,000 to 3,000 standing troops. Only when war came would they temporarily hire or recruit a large number of troops, and it would be considered quite good if they could gather several thousand or tens of thousands of people. The Wettin family was different, because they had huge financial support. Therefore, whether it was the Electorate of Saxony of the eldest branch or the Duchy of Saxony of the second branch, each family usually had several thousand standing troops. These standing troops are not cannon fodder soldiers temporarily recruited, but well-trained professional soldiers. Their combat effectiveness is much stronger than that of conscripted soldiers and they are not easy to collapse on the battlefield. Duke Albrecht of Saxony sent people to inquire. Although the Frisian noble republic was crippled by Marin, Groningen and Leeuwarden were difficult to capture because of their strong walls. In addition, after the war, the Frisian noble republic temporarily recruited 2,000 strong men and incorporated them into the army to strengthen the city defense. These new recruits may be easily defeated by stronger troops on the battlefield. But they are very useful in defending the city. Therefore, bringing tens of thousands of troops is enough to be safe. To this end, Duke Albrecht drew 5,000 veterans from the Duchy of Saxony and borrowed 5,000 veterans from his nephew to gather 10,000 professional troops. After taking an oath in Dresden, they quickly marched to the Frisian region. The vanguard of this army was a cavalry unit led by the knight Mavis whom Marin had seen before. After failing in the competition, Mavis returned to Dresden and continued to serve the Duke of Saxony. Because of the loss he suffered last time, Mavis became cautious and no longer went out drunk to avoid being ambushed. The last humiliation was something he would never forget. Although he failed to take revenge, Mavis became more cautious. His strong personal martial arts and cautious behavior made Duke Albrecht appreciate him even more. For this reason, Duke Albrecht of Saxony appointed Knight Mavis as the commander of 500 vanguard cavalry, responsible for clearing the way and dealing with the noble forces along the way. After all, from the Duchy of Saxony to the distant Frisian region, one has to pass through many principalities. Although the Saxon princes are powerful, the principalities along the way are not easy to mess with. Moreover, some principalities have banded together to fight against foreign enemies. For example, the princes in Westphalia, east of the Rhine, usually fight among themselves. But once an external prince invades the region, the princes in the region will easily put aside their prejudices and temporarily unite to resist the invasion. Other regions, such as the Rhineland, Swabia, Franconia, Wendisch, and Saxony, all have this characteristic. Although the Duchy of Saxony was powerful, it did not dare to offend these princes who were easy to unite, so as not to cause trouble. Therefore, the cavalry regiment led by Mavis was mainly responsible for opening the way and dealing with the nobles along the way. Although there were only 500 cavalrymen, most of them were light cavalrymen. In this era, cavalrymen were highly respected, and 500 cavalrymen could be considered a fully staffed cavalry regiment. Even an irregular cavalry regiment mainly composed of light cavalrymen had a much higher status than infantrymen with a number of 1,000 or 2,000. Therefore, Knight Mavis was given a great position this time. Because, generally speaking, only barons were qualified to be the commander of a cavalry regiment. Mavis had high military literacy and performed his mission very well. Along the way, the cavalry regiment successfully completed the task of clearing the way and established good relations with the nobles along the way. The 10,000 troops led by Duke Albrecht were mostly well-trained veterans. Therefore, even when marching, they could reach 30 to 40 kilometers a day, which was very fast. Of course, this was also because the wealthy Duchy of Saxony prepared a large number of horses and vehicles, which was very conducive to the army's long-distance march. In addition, the weather was good during this period, there was no rain, and the roads were not muddy. In addition to military preparations, Duke Albrecht also made a lot of diplomatic preparations. As one of the most important controllers of the second-largest business circle in the Hanseatic League, Duke Albrecht sent people to Groningen, the only Hanseatic city in the Frisian region, early on to quietly inform the Saxon merchants in the city to assist the Duke's actions. How can I help? That's easy. When Duke Albrecht of Saxony led an army of 10,000 to the city of Groningen, the Frisians were prepared to put up a resolute resistance and planned to ask for help from the surrounding Hanseatic cities. However, they were destined not to wait for rescue. Because the Duke of Saxony had already made diplomatic preparations. As one of the heads of the second-largest business circle in the Hanseatic League, Duke Albrecht had sent people to greet the nearby Hanseatic cities early on, asking them not to interfere. Moreover, even the Hanseatic League would find it difficult to make a decision to confront the Duke of Saxony. Because there were already many Hanseatic merchants in the Saxon business circle, and they would not agree to confront Duke Albrecht, and the same was true for their trading partners. Moreover, the Duke of Saxony had the support of the Emperor's edict. Even the Hanseatic League was unwilling to break up with the Emperor. Because many of the Hanseatic League's privileges required the Emperor's approval and authorization, especially in those imperial commercial cities. Therefore, when the Duchy of Saxony invaded the Frisian noble republic, even if the Frisians shouted their throats out, basically no one would come to rescue them. Because, for Emir Frisia, it was really unwise to fight against the Duke of Saxony, who had tens of thousands of veterans. After the Saxon army surrounded Groningen, the siege was indeed difficult. Although many of the new soldiers they used were rookies who had never seen blood, the Frisians relied on tall and solid walls for resistance, and it was difficult for the Saxon veterans to succeed quickly. Originally, this should have been a long battle, and Duke Albrecht was prepared for a long siege. However, after the Saxon army surrounded Groningen, a Saxon Hanseatic merchant named Meyer in the city had a crooked idea. Chapter 134, Frisia Changes Ownership, Part 2. Although Meyer was just a businessman, he wanted to become a noble. Although he was rich, his social status was not high and he was discriminated against by the nobles. Therefore, he wanted to buy a noble title. However, although noble titles were sold in Europe at that time, their value was very low. Mayer did buy a knighthood with his money. However, this knighthood was just a bare title without many practical benefits. At most, he could be exempted from the city entrance tax. In fact, because the title was bare, combined with his identity as a businessman, others could tell that the title was bought. Generally, the nobility is from such and such a family or such and such a place. Such and such indicates the origin. If it is from such and such a family, this family must be a noble family. If it is from such and such a place, this place must be the place of fiefdom. The title of knighthood that Mayer bought only has the bare title of Sir Mayer and cannot use the title of from XXX. According to the conventions of this era, only nobles with fiefs or knights from a noble family were considered true nobles. Of course, those apprentice knights, because of their high military strength, were also considered the reserve echelon of the nobility in Germany, which advocated military strength. Moreover, those apprentice knights could also use the prefix from a certain knight family to indicate their origin. As for those knights and squires, they were also recognized by people because they could use from a certain family. As for those who bought their titles, although they could be regarded as low-level nobles, people did not recognize them very much. This is like the Ming dynasty of the same era, where people who passed the exams were considered to be from a proper background. Those who bought their diplomas, such as the status of a student who paid to donate to become a student, were looked down upon. Although, students can also become officials. However, under normal circumstances, Jinsher and Juren who came from a long journey can become officials in prosperous areas. If students want to become officials, they can only go to the northwest, southwest, and Liaodong, which are poor and dangerous areas. Because there are no scholars from a proper background willing to go to these places, so they can only afford students who bought their diplomas. Mayer had a strong desire to become a genuine nobleman, and the difference between a genuine nobleman and the knighthood he bought was actually a source. As long as the Duke of Saxony was willing to reward him with a fief, he would have a source. However, in this era, although the nobles sold the title of knight, they did not sell the fiefdom casually. This was an unspoken rule that had been agreed upon. The title of knight was not easy to be inherited, so it was sold and it did not matter. But if the fiefdom was sold, it would be a big deal. The fiefdom could be inherited, and the nobles with the fiefdom could also be considered genuine nobles. Anyone who dared to sell it casually would be breaking the rules and would be excluded by other nobles. The old nobles were very hostile to the new nobles. Even people like Marin, who came from a low-ranking noble family, were rejected by the old nobles after becoming a baron, not to mention allowing a merchant to become the same as them. Therefore, although the nobles were willing to use the useless knighthood to exchange some money from the rich merchants, they were unwilling to let the merchants become real nobles. Of course, if this businessman has military merits, then no one would object to being officially made a noble. Just like Marin, because of his outstanding military merits. Even if the old nobles reject him, they will not despise him or deny him. Because Marin obtained the title by real military merits. In the martial Germany, military merits are the most respected. The reason why everyone rejects Marin is just because Marin belongs to the emperor's camp and is naturally hostile to the princes. However, no one has any objection to Marin's noble status. When Mayer learned that the Duke of Saxony had surrounded Groningen, he immediately became very active in his thoughts. Mayer was an arms dealer. After learning that Friesland had been defeated, he brought several carts of weapons and armor to Friesland to sell them. However, the Frisian nobles knew that the French would support them with weapons and armor, so they did not agree to buy Mayer's goods. Mayer was not aware of this, so he stayed in the city and wanted to continue selling. He was accompanied by dozens of mercenaries. After the Saxon army began to surround Groningen and launched an attack, Mayer's mind began to become active. He felt that his chance to make military achievements had come. If I can cooperate with the Duke of Saxony to take Groningen, then the Duke will definitely reward me. Maybe he will raise my title, or give me a fiefdom. However, in the fierce siege, the 60 mercenaries in Mayer's hands were too few and useless. After the siege began, the Frisians had blocked the city gates with large tree stumps, stones, bricks, etc. If they wanted to capture the city gates, 60 soldiers could defeat the soldiers near the city gates. However, it was not easy to move those stones and tree stumps. Therefore, in order to gain this military merit, Mayer began to secretly contact other Saxon Hanseatic merchants and ask them to borrow guards. In the following days, Mayer borrowed a lot of guards from various Saxon merchants. Although these merchants didn't have many guards, but if you had 10, he had 8, it was still a lot. A dozen Saxon Hanseatic merchants actually gathered 260 people. It just so happened that Mayer still had a lot of weapons and plate armor in his hands. So, under the command of Mayer, 260 mercenaries equipped themselves with two-handed swords and plate armor, ready to seize the city gate. On the morning of the seventh day, when the Saxon army launched another strong attack, Mayer rushed to the east gate with 260 merchant guards wearing plate armor. At this time, the main force of the Frisian army was attracted to the city wall. As for the city gate that had been blocked long ago, they paid insufficient attention and only sent dozens of conscripted soldiers to guard it. Facing the 260 fully armed merchant guards, the dozens of people guarding the city gate were unable to resist and were quickly chopped down. Mayer was also a smart man. After controlling the city gate, he immediately sent people to move the bricks and tree stumps. Moreover, he used the bricks and tree stumps to block the stairs leading to the ground on the city wall to prevent people on the city wall from killing him. Afterwards, the extra bricks and stumps were piled up behind the city gate to form a fortification, and half of Mayer's guards were deployed to guard behind the fortification to prevent the Frisians from counterattacking. In order to motivate the guards to fight to the death, Mayer signed a document on the spot and gave each mercenary guard a reward of 10 gold coins. He also promised that even if they died in the battle, Mayer would send the money back to their hometown. Under this stimulus, the morale of the guards was greatly boosted. Although the Frisians sent several hundred people to launch a counterattack, they were all beaten back by the guards who seemed to be on drugs with their fortifications and excellent equipment. An hour later, just as the Frisians were mobilizing their main forces to retake the city gate, Mayer's guards finally cleared the bricks and wooden stakes behind the city gate and opened it. Creaky, after a series of teeth-grinding noises, the east gate of Groningen was opened by Mayer's men. The Saxon troops who were attacking the city were a little stunned, not knowing what was going on. But Mayer didn't hesitate. He jumped out and shouted in the Saxon dialect, "What are you still standing there for? Get in there!" The Saxon warriors woke up as if from a dream, and immediately rushed in without hesitation, engaging in a fierce street fight with the Frisians. After all, the Frisians lost their elite troops in the war with Marin, and many of their two-handed swordsmen are still being held by Marin and forced to do hard labor on the Wadden Islands, and have not been released yet. Therefore, the most capable fighters in the city are actually only those 120 knights. As for the others, they were actually cannon fodder soldiers who were recruited here, and their combat effectiveness was very average. When they were asked to defend the city, they could still fight the enemy with their huge terrain advantage. But once the advantage of the city wall was gone, they immediately became cowardly. Saxony's professional army defeated the Frisians step by step. Seeing that Groningen could not bear it, the governor of the Frisian noble republic, Fiskfrigide, and 8 other noble councillors decisively took a batch of gold that was easy to carry, the 120 knights, and a group of soldiers with good combat effectiveness, opened the west gate, and rushed out. Coincidentally, after learning that the east gate was opened, the Duke of Saxony immediately transferred more than half of the troops from the other 3 directions to attack from the east gate. When Governor Fiskfrigide and his elite troops rushed out of the west gate, there were not many Saxon troops outside the west gate, and they were not particularly elite, all of them were infantry. However, the fleeing Frisian troops were all on horseback. After breaking through the defense line of the unprepared Saxon infantry, this group of people left. After all, the Saxons were here to attack. The Saxon infantry outside the west gate were busy attacking one moment, and the next moment they were attacked. So, they were inevitably caught off guard. When the Frisian elite troops launched the attack, many of them were still climbing the city wall. So, they didn't have time to arrange a defensive formation, and were rushed out by the Frisian breakout troops, and they couldn't catch up. However, Duke Albrecht did not care much about the fleeing Frisian nobles, because as long as Groningen was occupied, the finances of the Frisian noble republic would collapse and they would not be able to rise again. Of course, he did not ignore the enemy's escape. For this reason, he allocated 800 cavalry, led by Mavis, to chase the Frisian nobles. The Frisians fled this time with a total of 120 knights and 300 mounted infantry. When they rushed out of the city gate, they lost 50 people. Now, they only have about 370 people. If they are caught up by 800 cavalry, they will definitely not be able to escape. However, the Frisian nobles were obviously aware of this. So when they fled, they did not take the main road to the south and west, but took the small road to the north instead. Mavis did not catch up with the Frisian nobles, but he was not stupid. After failing to catch up with the Frisian nobles, he simply went west and came directly to the city of Leeuwarden and blocked the road into the city. In Friesland, only Groningen and Leeuwarden were relatively strong and suitable for long-term defense. The defense of other cities was not worth mentioning. As long as these 2 cities could not resist for a long time, the Saxon army would occupy the entire territory without any effort. Although Mavis could not capture Leeuwarden, he could prevent the Frisian nobles from entering Leeuwarden to resist. Thus, the Frisian nobles were caught in a dilemma. In the next few days, after occupying Groningen, the Duke of Saxony left 2,000 men to garrison Groningen, and the rest of the army continued to advance westward and capture various cities. The Frisian nobles were forced to hide in the swamps north of Leeuwarden, and were in a dilemma. The change of ownership of Frisia was a foregone conclusion. Although Leeuwarden was a strong city, it only had 1,000 defenders. Facing the Saxon army of tens of thousands, it was only a matter of time before it fell. Therefore, the few Frisian nobles had no choice but to surrender, go into exile, or die in battle. They were obviously unwilling to surrender or die in battle. Therefore, they could only choose to go into exile. But they were undecided about where to go. At the same time, the Frisian messenger for help also rushed to Lübeck, the capital of the Hanseatic League, and asked the League to help Groningen. However, Lübeck remained silent. The reason is simple, because the Saxons are also the second largest force in the Hanseatic League. If the League is determined to fight to the death with the Duke of Saxony, the League will inevitably split. Moreover, after the Civil War, the League will also be greatly weakened and will no longer have the strength to fight against the Kalmar Union of Denmark. Therefore, after weighing the pros and cons, Lübeck chose to remain silent and allowed the Duke of Saxony to occupy Groningen in order to ensure stability within the alliance.